Instead of your overall opinions on this budget, let's just drill down in it. Do you think that the rich should be paying more tax?
Yeah, I think so. This budget cuts will represent a saving of about $5,000 for someone who's making $200,000 a year. But would they rather have that $5,000, or would they rather their mum was able to get a GP appointment? We need good hospitals and schools and public transport infrastructure and local government services for people to thrive and to lead good lives. And that necessitates a tax contribution from people. And obviously, those who are in highly rewarded positions should be contributing a bit more towards that, particularly in this in a difficult economic climate. I think it's an eccentric decision to decide that now's the time.
All right, I'll stop you there because we'll come back to you. All right, we'll come back to you. Mark Littlewood, who is Director General of the Institute of Economic Affairs. Should the rich be paying more?
Not than they are at the moment, because the problem is it always becomes a bit more. The problem with the argument we've just heard is, when are the circumstances in which you think the rich might be paying their fair share? Has that position ever prevailed in recent history? Of course, the rich should pay more tax, and they do. If you're earning a good salary, you're paying a lot more tax than if you earn a poor salary. That's how the tax system operates. What the government tried to do today is say it's not all about taking one slice of the pie and giving it to another. We've actually got to get off that cycle of just working out how you divvy things up, because the real problem in the economy has been growth, has been woeful for the last 15 years. Wages have been stagnant. The economy has been growing, Patrick, at the rate of about 1% a year in round terms. We need to get it back to 2 or 3% a year. And that means incentives across the board. We have tried to deafen destruction the idea that the solution to every problem is to get a bit more tax out of the rich. Unfortunately, after 15, 20 years of attempting it, it doesn't seem to have done much for the poor.
OK, all right, I'll lob that back over to you, Luke. You've heard what Mark Littlewood has had to say there. Some people would say that, you lack a bit of aspiration.
I feel I've been living in a slightly different country or world to Mark the past 15 years. I mean, I think it will depend on your perspective. But I recall George Osborne cutting corporation tax, cutting inheritance tax, cutting the top rate of income tax. Kwasi Kwarteng said today our entire focus is on making Britain more globally competitive. George Osborne was always going on about the global race. Britain taxes much less than European countries, and we certainly spend less on supporting people on lower incomes, and we also have lower median household incomes than just about everywhere in Western Europe. So,
all right, Luke. Mark's shaking his head, Luke. Mark's shaking his head at you. What's going on, Mark?
This seems continuation.
Parallel universe. Tax is at its highest rate in total as a proportion of national income for 70 years, since the late 1940s. You can argue how it's divvied up, but the total tax rate is the highest it's been in our lifetimes by far. Public spending is the highest it's been in our lifetimes by far. Regulation is its highest in British history by far. You have indeed been living in a parallel universe. Tax has gone up, spending has gone up, regulation has gone up, and it doesn't seem to have cracked the poverty problem. Mark, time for a different strategy, surely.
Mark, I'll throw one back to you, Mark, and then I'll let Luke come in on it, because I think one of Luke's points was about public services, right, which is about GPs and the NHS and teachers and whatever, right? So unless we have more tax of the rich, I mean, how are we going to be able to fund pay rises for them or more money for public services, which is what people really care about?
Well, you need economic growth is what you need, Patrick. There aren't enough multimillionaires in this country to fund the NHS entirely out of their income tax. Right? What you need in order to fund it is to get economic growth coming back, so that typically, on average, it won't be the same for every person every year, but that you see your salary going up by, say, 2-3% above inflation. That should be the norm. When you get that, tax revenues start flowing in. It's no accident that 15 years since the global financial crisis, there or thereabouts, high tax, high spend, high regulation, that's the universe I've been living in. Those are the actual numbers. I don't quite know what Luke's been observing, hasn't delivered this. So we've got to get back to a strategy that delivers economic growth. everybody pays more then. If everybody's salary's going up, they spend more, they contribute more in income tax. That's how you get public services properly funded. And this put up the rates, have more regulations, and as I say, public spending has outstripped economic growth since 2015 by an enormous factor. Hasn't worked for the poor or indeed for many other people.
OK, Luke, there's lots for you to come back to there. Go on, crack on.
Well, I'd just say that there's no correlation between the low taxation and economic growth, or low regulation and economic growth. All it really achieves is that people in the middle and at the bottom who rely on the NHS, the education system, public transport, can't afford to go to private healthcare or use private schools or whatever, lose out. The countries that are generally more prosperous than us, Scandinavia, Germany, the Netherlands, other parts of Northwest Europe, tend to tax more and provide more in terms of public services and social security. And I think, that's what we need to be thinking about, particularly at such a difficult moment in time for our economy and in terms of people's household incomes and covering the cost of living.